Resistance 3 starts with a scene that ended the sequel. Hale transforms into Chimera and Capelli shoots him in the head. And if you want to know what happened in the previous two parts of the main game and a little PSP spin-off called Retribution, check out my other videos. So Hale is dead, and his blood became a valuable resource for the laboratory studies. Dr. Malikov found a unique protein in his blood and used it to create a vaccine, a cure for Chimera virus. While Hale was considered a hero, Capelli was accused of killing him and got kicked out of the army. He started to live a normal life, got married, and there he is, 4 years later, in the small city in Oklahoma, living a typical post-apocalyptic family man's life in the underground community. One day, they are approached by a Chimerian death squad. Humans try to stay low until they pass, but they got noticed and a battle breaks. Joe and others manage to defend the city, but Tommy Dean is missing in action, so Joe decides to go look for him. Tommy shows Joe a transformer outside the city. Meanwhile, his wife informs on the radio that someone walked into town claiming he knows Joe. Joe tells his wife that they are no longer safe underground and she needs to evacuate everyone quickly. Their conversation is interrupted by Chimera air attack that almost kills Tommy. Joe fights his way back to the tunnels and turns out that the guy who asked about him is Dr. Malikov. Joe is mad that he has been followed by Chimera and brought them here. Malikov explains that the bomb detonated by Hale in Mexico acted as a catalyst and power surge through the Chimerian tower in New York activated a bridge through the space and time. Since then, it has become a source of cold that slowly freezes the entire planet. Malikov asks Joe to help him shut that tower or humanity won't survive the next winter. Joe rejects and goes with his men to fight against the invasion, ordering his wife to evacuate through the tunnels. They manage to slow down the Chimera attack and buy the rest some time. When he meets Susan again, she convinces him to help Malikov, as this might be the only chance for a better future. Joe makes sure they escape safely and joins Malikov on the trip to New York. They use a boat to get through the flooded city. Malikov spots leapers that clearly evolved independently of the hive mind. Turns out there are actually many chimeras who live freely right now, and their society is divided at this point. When they reach the Mississippi, they meet a Goliaths passing by. They get spotted and the boat is destroyed. Luckily, they survived the explosion and the crash, though Malikov is wounded, but still they need to walk through St. Louis. Malikov is injured and he needs to grab a rest, so they go to the coal tower and there they spot a VTOL. So Malikov sends Joe to find it, believing it would help them to get to New York faster. Turns out the VTOL is pinned by Chimeran soldiers and Capelli uses a rifle to help the crew. They take him to their hideout where he meets their leader Charlie. Well, actually it took a few battles to break through the city, and turns out Malikov has already been found by the human remains and he is not looking good. Charlie tells Joe that if he gets them a power supply from a Chimerian dropship in exchange, he will receive penicillin for Malikov. Joe agrees, but he also wants a ride to New York and looks like they have a deal. There's a dropship on patrol down by the river, so humans prepare an ambush to shoot down the ship. But it turns out 2 dropships came instead of 1 and a serious battle breaks out. Joe and Charlie manage to run away and secure the power supply. They try to use the gondola to escape, but it was attacked by Chimera, so Joe decides to jump out and fight to protect Charlie. Capelli manages to defeat Chimera and Charlie is impressed, so they decide to help Joe and Malikov to get to New York. While flying a VTOL, Joe has a flashback with his wife and son. It's rather a disturbing vision that makes him think that they might be in trouble. As he tries to convince Charlie to go check on them with his man, the plane gets attacked by Chimera. Charlie promises Joe he will find his family and Capelli jumps out of the plane. Turns out he's in Pennsylvania. Malikov connects through the radio and guides him through to the train on the other side of the bridge where the two meet again. Malikov tells Capelli they can use the train tunnel, but a woman interrupts them and tells to come with her. She says that the train is broken and her husband can fix it, but he has been missing for a few days. You can tell those guys are some kind of a religious freaks, as she basically can't build a sentence without mentioning God, prayer or Satan. Anyway, the deal is simple. Joe must find the guy who can fix the train. The place looks more like Transylvania than Pennsylvania, but Capelli manages to find Jonathan Rose. He says that he is on a mission to kill the creature and he's not getting back until he does the job, so I guess we all know where this is going. Father Jonathan guides Capelli into the mines where the creature lives. When they find it, they are up for a battle in the narrow tunnels until this huge-ass Chimera gets stuck in one of them and becomes an easy target. Joe uses a technique he saw once in Chicago and feeds the creature with some explosive that turn the beast into a strawberry jam. Train gets fixed and the duo is on the road again. Well, it goes well until Malikov decides to break the awkward silence and gives a confession how he regrets everything that he brought on humanity in last 3 games. He also decides to boost the team spirit by saying that they have a very little chance of succeeding in New York City and probably will die. And this great team talk is interrupted by a guy calling for help. He is chased by other humans and gets killed by a machete. And look at this! A skull tattoo! That must be a bad guy. And you know what? He orders his men to go after the train. So now Capelli and Malikov must defeat the train from rednecks with jeeps and guns. The worst kind. Actually, they are doing quite okay, but in the act of desperation, rednecks hit the train by one of the bigger tracks and it crashes. Capelli gets stuck and Malikov saves his life, but he gets attacked by the skull tattoo guy who kills the old doctor. Capelli wakes up in captivity. Turns out the rednecks run some kind of a post-apocalyptic UFC down here. Capelli is thrown straight into the arena, where he must fight with chimeras using hammer. He kills a few dozen of them and guess that was not the scenario since the skull tattoo redneck orders his men to get down and kill Capelli. But he deals with those schmucks as well. So, skull tattoo redneck decides to stun Capelli. By the way, his name is Mick, just for the record, but I'ma call him Skull Tattoo Redneck. Joe is woken up by a guy named Herbert Savitsky, who explains he's a fan of Malikov and he has a plan how to escape from Skull Tattoo Redneck's prison. Long story short, he helps Capelli to escape from what actually is a prison facility, and those thugs are actually ex-convicts who turned their prison into a stronghold and live day by day finding happiness in the little things that the anarchy offers. Capelli and Savitsky free other prisoners and a riot breaks. It attracts the attention of Chimera patrols nearby and they attack the facility. Meanwhile, Capelli duels Skull Tattoo Redneck and shoots him in the head. He manages to save Savitsky and few other people right before the place is grounded by Chimerian ships. Savitsky actually offers his help, but Capelli is like, take care, and walks away. Joe reaches New York on his foot. Quite impressive since according to Google Maps it's like 3 days of non-stop walking. Walking in freezing cold in this case. And as you can see, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. Luckily, Joe finds some booze and a working radio station. He tries to inform his wife that he is in New York, but since Malikov is dead, he is not sure if he can handle the tower by himself. Still, he decides to go for it. He moves through the streets and subway lines filled with all sorts of chimera, including huge-ass spider. Joe actually manages to get close to the tower, but enemy starts a heavy air fire, and thank God Charlie shows up with a helicopter saving Joe from a sure death. Charlie says he heard his message on the radio and that his wife and child are okay. He wants to take Joe home since getting into the tower seems impossible, but Joe doesn't want to let go and he has a plan to shoot down one of those terraformers, using it to destroy the tower. Well, Charlie actually approves that and they just go for the terraformer, and under a heavy anti-aircraft fire, Capelli manages to jump on the platform and gets in. Soon he meets with Charlie, who says he already found the control room and set the transformer to drift towards the tower. So now they need to find a power supply. While Joe is on the way there, Susan decides to call and says she regrets Joe taking this quest. Well, I guess it's a little too late for that, sweetheart, since Capelli is already in the power room and he's just one huge-ass chimera and even bigger shield away from saving humanity. Joe manages to destroy the core and the terraformer begins to blow up. Joe runs as fast as he can to reach Charlie and get out, but he falls down the platform and a huge Chimera is still on his back. Hanging on just one hand, he tries to fight against the enemies, and though he falls down, he quickly grabs a hanging wire and lands on another platform, but soon it also breaks and Joe falls down along with the huge-ass Chimera, who gets stuck into the power stream, while Joe is saved by Charlie and his man, who somehow managed to fly into this thing and grab Capelli. Falling terraformer destroys the tower and opens a portal that sucks it in and closes back. Then we see Susan hearing good news through the radio. Broadcaster says that the tower was destroyed and the temperature is rising. Susan spots a VTOL landing outside and turns out it's Joe, who hugs his wife and son. Then we get those broadcasts from Dakota and other places in the US and all over the world actually, confirming that humans are pushing Chimera back and turning the war in their favor. We also see some drawings of a Statue of Liberty being rebuilt, people celebrating, and Joe visiting Malikov's grave in a cemetery named after Nathan Hale. And that's how the game ends.